Good morning. It's always exciting when the tribe gathers. I thank you all for coming. I know your time is valuable, and I appreciate your attendance today. I would like to invite you to join us in a conversation about making the world a safer place for us all. A conversation about the START Network. The START Network is a positive disruptor in humanitarian aid created by the incumbents. It's a movement for large-scale collaboration, decentralized power, and system change. A pipeline of opportunities that demonstrates possibility, that realizes possibility, and invigorates hope. The START Network is collaboration at scale that enables you to create the system that you know the world needs. So this is inspiring, but it's also practical. So what I'd like to do is to take you through a few slides that show the things that we're doing to help realize this very inspiring vision. We have four main areas of collaboration within the START Network. The first is something called the START Fund. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's our flagship product. It's the world's first collectively owned multi-donor pooled funding mechanism, and it's really effective. Many people in the room are involved in how it works. Over the last 2 years, it's done 80 alerts, 58 activations. It's served 3 million people in 37 countries and dispersed 13 million pounds. It's earlier, faster, and cheaper than anything else in the humanitarian financing arena. START Engage is our second area of work. This is what we used to call capacity building. We have a portfolio of 14 different projects in 11 countries that help build the decentralized system with more local capacity that we strive to do. There are 44 lead partners and over 100 national NGOs that are participating in this program. The third area that we work in is something called collaborative responses. These are crisis-specific umbrella grants that give donors a single entry point, and we manage we facilitate the distribution of the funds across different organizations. This is an example of one that's ongoing right now, the European Refugee Response. 17 agencies and 21 million pounds of British taxpayer money is helping 3 million people in these countries to deal with the European refugee crisis. The fourth area is START Labs. This is our innovation program. It's a collectively owned incubator of experiments. That collective action and that collective dimension allows us to take risks that are difficult for a single organization to take, and allows us to mobilize resources and make investments that a single organization can't make. For example, we're working on two new financial products for NGOs. One's parametric drought insurance. It's a type of insurance product that would fund NGOs to respond and stabilize a drought situation based on scientific triggers. There are people in the room today who are involved in making this scheme possible. The second thing we'll be developing is a credit facility that will give your organizations financing to intervene earlier, before the crisis hits the media headlines. So the question is all this worth it? I'd like to introduce Dr. Deepti. Tell us, Deepti.
Is it worth it? Right, so I'm here to pose a difficult question. Is it worth it? What I'd like to offer this morning is 5 reflections that I've had over my very long and illustrious tenure of 3 months at the START Network. And I will leave you with these reflections to deliberate over how we collectively answer this question. Is it really worth it? So, the first reflection. We are plugging what is a significant gap in the humanitarian system. So let's begin by recognizing that about 48% of humanitarian needs are currently not met by the system. With that in mind, almost 50% of the START Fund, the flagship program that Sean referred to, almost 50% of the START Fund's responses had absolutely no donors prior to, during, or after the actual START Fund response. This is particularly important when we think about what that means for communities. So I'll give you a really, what I think is a powerful quote from a response in Colombia. So this is the ACF country director for Colombia. And I just want to read this quote out to you. The START Fund makes decisions in 72 hours. No other donors at this moment are able to do that. We applied for the country-based pooled fund from OCHA and didn't receive approval for 4 months. My team, which has 8 years of experience, said that this was the first time that we implemented an emergency project in the time frame that we should have done. Speed matters. Here is my second reflection. START is seeing some efficiencies in the overall response, but this is anecdotal and uneven at this stage. So I'd like to offer you an example of an innovative solution that has delivered efficiencies. It's small, and this is why it's important to recognize where these sorts of innovations and efficiencies are happening so we can learn, grow, and be more effective. So the NRC decided to collectively deal with information management and response within a camp in Chios in Greece. What the NRC did was design with other agencies, local actors, and local authorities WhatsApp groups that allowed information to flow freely across the different stakeholders in the response. Here is an example of a snapshot from this WhatsApp group. It gives you a sense of how the different actors are able to access information in a way that is efficient. And just as importantly, in fact, most importantly, we were able to see reduction in levels of anxiety for the refugees passing through that camp, simply because they had access to information. My third reflection, START is creating more trust. This is starting to lead to some sustainable change and greater impact by members. Trust is essential in networks for scale, for impact, and for sustainability. I'm going to leave you with an example of what trust enables for the quality of a response. So in Nigeria, one of the early pilots for a decentralized method of working for the START Fund, we were able to start to see the implications of trust building across peers. So as part of the peer review process for projects, the IRC at that point was asked to change as a part of critical reflection of the project that it had proposed to the peer review group. It changed its NFI kits to reach 20,000 more beneficiaries than it had originally planned. And this was only possible because there was trust built within that peer group, within that network, that allowed for reflection, that allowed for honest criticism, and therefore a better quality response. My fourth point. We're still learning about what collaboration offers, but we're seeing some sparks emerging. We know that only 0.2% of reported humanitarian funding was channeled directly to national and local NGOs in 2014. We also know that a majority of START Fund projects, and I'm going to say 73%, have been implemented directly by member field staff. This, to me, is where START's rhetoric meets reality. We were able to address in-country political sensitivities. We were able to reach communities that were hard to access. We were able to work with communities that we had very limited access to and trust with. And this is an example, I'll give you an example in India where, as a result of working with and collaborating with local agencies, we were able to deal with all of these issues. So for a flood response in India recently, a few member agencies came together, working directly through local partners in order to reach hard-to-reach communities, in order to deal with political sensitivities in India. So when I say sparks are emerging, these are the sparks that we see. These are ways in which we see ourselves testing our approach, learning, and then being more effective in our response. It's suffice to say that we have many partnerships, many forms of collaboration that we're testing. So we have the African Risk Capacity, a way of learning from and sharing expertise on insurance products. We work with and through 44 partners through Start Engage, which Sean referred to earlier as well. We're testing new forms of collaboration. We're testing new ways of working. These are difficult things to test. What does collaboration offer? And what we're trying to do with this massive experiment in START is to ask ourselves that difficult question. So, what does this actually mean for crisis-affected communities? And this actually leads me to my final point. We're continuing to ask difficult questions. We're seeing some remarkable progress. We're seeing some great success. But we also know that there's a lot that we don't know just yet. Our aspiration as the START network is to continue to grow, to learn, to adapt, and to be more effective in our response. I'm going to leave you with two questions. Two questions that are difficult to ask, just as difficult to answer, but we don't shy away from asking them because they're difficult to answer. One, what is our role as START in meeting the needs of communities affected by crisis, and what more do we need to do? Second question, how do we know if the communities that we work with consider our responses to be the best possible solution for them? Within the humanitarian system, what START is really doing through its work is catalyzing and aggregating. And Sean, I'd like you to tell us a bit more about how we do that. Thank you.
Deepti is our head of evidence. She's just started a few months ago. We hired Deepti to help assure our stakeholders that the evidence and feedback that we're providing is the truth. So she has an easy job. I guess my job is to help you understand what you can do when you work together at scale. So where is this all heading? You can think of the START network as a collectively owned aggregator. Aggregator is a term used in the private sector, but I think it's clearly an important term in the humanitarian sector now, as donors with few civil servants are trying to figure out how to reach out and have partnerships with many, many local organizations. So this thing about aggregation is really important to the future of the humanitarian system. The START network is a collectively owned aggregator. And I think that's different, that's unique, and that's very powerful. What that enables us to do is to create and catalyze a new global network of collectively owned funding mechanisms around the world. There is a really exciting opportunity here to create a new global public good. Our vision for that new global public good is to create a new economy around humanitarian aid that will generate the resources that enable us to change. I mean, to state the obvious, you all know this, but let me just say it so we're all on the same page. You know, most of humanitarian work is conducted by NGOs. 3/4 of humanitarian action is implemented at the last mile by civil society. And those organizations have a reactive business model. We need bad news on the front page of the newspaper in order to generate the donations that allow us to do something about the bad news in the first place. And we've allowed ourselves to be judged on our overhead rates. A good NGO is one that doesn't spend a lot of money on itself, not on our impact, on our overhead rates. And yet the size of the humanitarian aid system is $24 billion a year. We spend more on bubblegum. We spend $26 billion a year on bubblegum. This is the world safety net implemented by a population of organizations that have a crisis of legitimacy, according to the ODI. We've maxed out at the size of bubblegum in a business model that doesn't give us the money to invest in changing. The World Humanitarian Summit in 2 weeks is going to talk about how to change the system from within. The problem is there isn't the money to change. We need a new economy. We need to look to other places to find the resources we can to change. So this is possible. And it's inspiring. So this is the team today. It's a very inspiring group of organizations, not-for-profit, and commercial firms that have been inspired by what you're doing together to help out. On the team also are many inspiring and hardworking and dedicated people like Deepti. There is a great team of people who are working incredibly hard to support your work. One in particular I'd like to celebrate is a fellow called Jem Gherkin. He's a dedicated, warm, smart, hardworking young man who stepped into a leadership role over the last 8 months and pulled off this entire week by himself. He's an example of the inspiring people who have joined this effort. There are 250,000 people around the world working inside your organizations who are just like him. That is an incredible resource for a changing world. There's much to celebrate about the NGO and much that NGOs have to offer. So I'd like to leave you with a few last thoughts. Collaboration through the START network gives you scale. Scale gives you opportunities, like new business models, that give you agency, that you can use to change yourselves and change the system. So the system is fit for the 21st century, so that people in crises can live with dignity, so that our children can live in safety. Collaboration is the new competition. Scale gives you agency. The world needs us not as we are, but as we could be. So today, be kind to yourselves. You are all heroes. Let's do something great today. I'd like to introduce a dear friend of mine, Mr. Huang Sands, who has been a humanitarian for the past 32 years. He started on the front line, literally the front line. And over that 32 years has worked in many organizations, including a lot of work with the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement and the Sphere Project. He now specializes in creating enabling environments where humanitarians can understand themselves better to be more effective.